Ian, before we start, can I ask you one question?
You may.
Is it really your friend's voice that narrates the opening, or is that you doing a British accent?
I will tell you that nobody does a worse British accent than me. So I was going to say absolutely my friend Simeon.
Pretty astounding if it was your accent, because it's like spot on. It's like Alec Guinness-esque.
Is it? It sounds exactly like you, Ian. I don't understand it, but I'll take your word.
Welcome to Auteur Detour.
That's what it is. That's it. I don't understand. All right.
This is Auteur Detour, wherein three film lovers travel through the filmographies of cinema's most important directors in hopes of finding a greater understanding on the other side.
There's gonna be a second podcast where I get underneath the lies and figure out.
It's like searching for Richard Simmons podcast, but it's trying to figure out who Simeon is.
Yeah, exactly. Simeon. It's like an anagram of something that's gonna point to the true. Yeah. All right. Should we start?
Do it.
Welcome to Auteur Detour. Three friends diving into the filmographies of our favorite directors. I'm Travis. With me, as always, are Chris Balazza.
Hello.
Broadcasting from his daughter's bedroom, so he says, and Ian Hinckley.
Hi.
Currently, we're examining the works of Joel and Ethan Coen. I'm going to edit out that After the critical and modest financial success of their powerful, slow burn first feature, Joel and Ethan wanted to create something in an almost opposite stylistic vein, where Blood Simple was slow and quiet. Raising Arizona would be Roadrunner fast, as loud as TNT, and full to the brim of brilliant, absurd, screwball dialogue. Raising Arizona stars Nicolas Cage as H.I. McDonough, a repeat convenience store stick-up man with a heart of gold, and Holly Hunter as Ed, the police officer whose heart is his greatest theft. In a tour de force 11-minute pre-credit sequence, High narrates the story of their unconventional courtship, their inability to start a family, and their decision to steal a baby from a rich family recently blessed with quintuplets. Of course, like so many Coen Brothers films, this seemingly negligible transgression unleashes a force of evil and destruction upon the world, here in the form of a biker seemingly escaped from the set of Mad Max. Add to the mix a bumbling fraternal duo of bank robbers, a classic Coen Brothers blowhard boss, and an airstream full of musical set pieces, and an unexpected emotional wallop, all in a 94-minute movie, and you have, in my opinion, one of the best comedies ever made, and possibly the Coens' greatest contribution to the American film canon. What do you guys think?
I'll go first for a second, I guess. I mentioned last week, this is the movie that was my gateway into the Coen Brothers. I grew up, watching it regularly and definitely had it sort of in my early life, like canonized as one of the great comedies. And I still agree with that. I think that there's like two conversations that have to be had about this movie.
Here we go.
Because I think that it's like, no, really, like I think like how it fits into their, filmography. Mm-hmm. And like what it means for, I don't know, whatever we're trying to get out of this,
yes.
Like discussing them, it kind of stands apart from the rest of their movies, or at least most of the rest of the movies.
It does, a little bit.
And so I like watching it through this time, it really like kind of, I don't know, it had a different feel to me than when I usually watch it, which is like, as just a great comedy of the 80s. Because I think it is that. Like, it's maybe, it's in the top comedies of the 80s for sure. Like you said, maybe one of the top comedies of all time.
Well, what's interesting when you watch it too now, if I may interject, is just that it feels in the stylistic realm more like, an early Tim Burton movie, or more like After Hours, or more like even a John Landis movie in some moments. Yeah. So more than like a later Coen Brothers movie, even though in my opinion, like I said, I think there's a couple Coen Brothers movies that like parallel this one to like an uncanny degree. But anyway, go ahead.
I know we got to get back into that, but I also want to hear what Chris has to say because I already kind of know.
Yeah, I know how much you guys really, really love this film. I think I'm the outlier to that degree. I don't dislike this film. I do like it, and it's one that's grown on me. I only wish that I'd caught it sooner, like closer to when it had come out. I only watched this movie, man, it must have been maybe 10 years ago, which was clearly way later after it had come out, and I revisited it for the sake of the podcast, and it actually has since grown on me ever since that. I rewatched it and went, yeah, funny. I've definitely laughed a bit, and I enjoyed the setup and the absolute stark difference between it and the one that came before it, of course, Blood Simple, which you just mentioned. So the tonal shift was really kind of refreshing to a degree, when you watch two very different films back to back. But I can't say I love it as much as you guys do. I really like the each character has their own sort of world that they inhabit, and the language that they speak, and the mannerisms that they exude. But overall, not one of my favorite Coen films, but it's certainly one that has grown on me since watching it again, more so than others, which I could say later, that have actually sort of like lost favor in my eyes, if you will. But I'm interested to talk about it and see what you guys have to say.
Yeah, well, I watched it a few weeks ago when we were just talking about getting this podcast started. And, it was like revisiting a familiar classic to me because, and I really didn't even watch it that closely because I've seen it so many times. I could kind of, recite it in a lot of ways. And then I watched it again this week. And I got to tell you, this might be a bummer to hear, because I had an experience where I'm like, this is not gonna be a fun talk for Travis. I found a lot to not like about the movie. I hate to say that.
You guys are welcome to not like things. I'm not like, you guys are like afraid to tell me your opinions. Like I'm gonna do something to you. Like, no, we're all allowed to have our own opinions. And I'm like, you guys always have something interesting to say, whether or not we agree. But Chris, I think you're right on in the sense that like the characters all have like their own language and stuff like that, and like even like the first one had a little bit of that, but this is such a Coen Brothers thing where each character has their own philosophy, their own like outlook, and their language is like crafted, almost determines like their kind of worldview, or vice versa. And I think that really is an interesting detail. But Ian, I want to hear more about what you don't like about the movie. Because there's some flaws here. I mean, this is like a ramshackle production. Like all the seams are visible. All the crazy camera work. There's like a bumpiness to it and like a homemade quality that I love, but also
I actually love that.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah,
and I do want to I don't want to forget that this is their second movie and that they're like still these completely independent filmmakers that are like trying to do something bigger than the last thing that they did. Like, I don't want to that's...
And if I may add, what the hell have you ever done, Ian?
Well, that's an excellent... Almost nothing.
Right, all right. Podcast over.
But I think like the thing that didn't hold up for me this time is sort of like... Maybe it's just because I've been watching a lot of Coen Brothers movies and I'm kind of like... understanding their aesthetic. Here's the weird thought that I had is like, how there's like this trope that happens in a lot of movies. There's like a couple that I can think of specifically, but there's variations on it in like throughout cinema history where like a newcomer to Earth or like a baby that's smarter or whatever it is will see like the history of the world and its atrocities and be like, what is this world? Like, why do you do such cruelty to each other? Like, it usually happens. Like, I'm thinking of like Fifth Element when Mila Jovovich sees like the Nazis and she's like, you humans are so cruel to each other. And then like somebody teaches them love. Like that happens in a lot of movies.
Can you name one other movie? I'm not that familiar with.
Tomorrowland. Yeah. Like, I don't know. It's
Can you
like
name a movie I have seen all the way through?
Well, I can't, but okay. I'm sure that like there's some, the bottom line is like where somebody is appalled by the atrocities. It happens in WALL-E, where somebody's appalled by the atrocities of mankind. And then through an act of love, they like discover what's worth saving mankind over.
But doesn't it usually involve someone who's not man that makes that revelation?
I'm sure it does. My whole point of bringing this is I'm trying to imagine the Coen brothers like making a case for mankind, and I can't do it. And I think this is their closest version to that. Like they're so pessimistic and they're so cynical that like that trope that happens in movies where it's like, no, like we are worth it. Like we're worth saving. Like that.
So you think The Fifth Element is a more powerful and meaningful film than
I'm on the Coen Brothers side.
Oh, okay. Humanity is.
I'm like humanity's not worth saving.
Well, that sounds almost like Seven, like the end of Seven, like Morgan Freeman's like final monologue at the end, like they say the world's a beautiful place and worth saving. I agree with the last part or whatever, right?
Right, and like I think the closest they get to like saying the antithesis of that is in like No Country for Old Men, where they're just like, listen, the world is a chaotic fucking nightmare and like all we do is roll through it. And this is their like closest movie, as far as I can tell, to being like, there's hope in the
life
world.
is beautiful.
Life is beautiful.
Even though like he says, like H.I. says, like it can be a hard world for little things. You know what I mean? That you feel like that. There is a harshness there too. Yeah.
Which is from Night of the Hunter. Did you know that?
Oh, I haven't seen Night of the Hunter in a minute, but that's great. Yeah, but that's totally from that movie. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah,
and I love that, and it's a good like measure of, again, to bring it back to like how immersed in classic film the Coen brothers are, and this has a lot of that, especially old Screwballs and stuff like that. Yeah. But like,
and the Looney Tunes. Anyway. I mean, there was some sound editing in this movie that was like Looney Tune worthy. When his like foreman or whatever like says to his kids like, get away from HI's truck or car or whatever, and like it cuts to them and all of a sudden it's just this like chaotic like explosion of noises of them destroying the car and like yelping like kind of animals.
Totally.
Oh my god.
Well, I mean, I mean, look at his haircut. It literally is like a Woody. It was fashioned after Woody Woodpecker. You know what I mean? Like it literally is a Woody Woodpecker.
And I do like, that's the thing is like, I don't want to say I don't love this movie again, because I will always love this movie. And I think it's hilarious. And I think that like they do a great job with it. It just doesn't feel like a Coen Brothers movie to me, because it is not cynical. Like it's hopeful. And that doesn't ring true to me. I don't know. I mean, it does in other movies. I will cry my eyes out in It's a Wonderful Life like anybody else. But like when the Coen Brothers try to do it, it's just like, I don't know. It just feels like they're making somebody else's movie to me. I don't know.
Oh, it feels very real to me. I was very emotionally moved during this movie, like maybe more than any of their other movies that I've seen. I mean, like No Country for Old Men kind of leaves you shaken, and Fargo does as well. But this one, it's there is like a sweetness to it. But I found it very authentic and convincing. I guess.
What do you think about that, Chris? Do you think it's like? Do you think the hopefulness rings true in it, or does it not even hit you at all?
I don't know. I didn't even, honestly, it didn't strike me. It felt very Coen-esque to me in that sense. I mean, there's often like a chord of hopefulness, like even Fargo. Even though we touched on, how like the kid that they're, Frances McDormand's character is about to bring into the world is like, but they're together and like in the end they're happy and they're about to bring in this new baby, and there's always like maybe like a shred of hopefulness perhaps to it. I mean, what's his name? Tommy Lee Jones is unscathed. He escaped with his life. No one else can say that, he's out of the game or whatever. I mean, it's not like a great world that he's inheriting or whatever, but at least he has his life and his family or his wife or whatever to be with. Mm-hmm. So I think there's always almost usually at least, maybe like Mana wasn't there, might be an exception or whatever, but no, even when he gets executed, he's like, well, I get to go see Doris and she'll be there. Right. You know what I mean? And I'll tell her all the things they don't get to have words for here or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's more of like a cynicalness with the world though, like where they're like, there are people, but in this one, the world feels very much like, even when he's getting shot out by grocery clerks in like that brilliant sequence, it doesn't feel like there's any threat. It's just like we're in this cartoon kind of world. I don't know. Maybe
the world that's the threat is the world from which the biker kind of comes. There's like the world that we all live in, and there's the world he comes from, and that represents like a world that we don't really get to touch as much in the movie, but he's just that force. And like, I don't think that really like works too well, because it's not this underlying theme, undercuts the whole film necessarily. So I think I see where you're coming from. I don't know that I totally agree.
Once again, I failed to do any research for this week's episode, but I did stumble upon one thing that said, the Wikipedia page for this movie, which said that I guess critical reception was really mixed for this one. And basically one of the main complaints was that they were just confounded and annoyed by the movie's mix of like realism and kind of like realism and just kind of fantasy, I guess. I mean, just the way that like the characters seem so well drawn and so particular to like a place and time, and then at the same time there's these kind of fantastical elements and stuff like that, which I think is like
I think
brilliant creative thing.
I think that like critics were just not caught up yet. I think that they were ahead of the game on this.
No,
one,
that's
it's not just that. But also, like, I read Ebert's review at the time, and he hated it. He gave it 1.5 stars.
Yeah.
And like,
no, he says exactly, like, to your credit, Travis. He says the movie can't decide if it exists in the real world of trailer parks and 7-Elevens and Pampers, or in a fantasy world of characters from another dimension. It cannot decide if it's about real people or about comic exaggerations. And I don't know. You didn't get it, maybe.
Stupid. And like, one of the things that I love about the movie, and that I know we've talked about off the podcast, is like, one of the things he hated about it, which is that like the characters talk in a way, and this is like a brilliant Coen Brothers thing, where like the characters talk based on, or the characters' vocabulary is based on what they would have been reading. And Ebert hated that they're like, you know, using this sort of biblical like language.
Overly wrought.
Overly, yeah, exactly. And that all the characters were. And he's like, maybe if like only Nicolas Cage had done that, then that would make sense. But it's like, no, like they're giving like a vibe and like a tone. And they're also just like, this is what the people would have been reading. Like in their words, it's like magazines in the Bible. Like they're just like, that's where they got like their idea for the dialogue.
Can we take a second and maybe talk about the characters in this movie? Because this one has maybe like 5 of my favorite characters in any of their films, and like all with like pitch perfect performances. Like, and I feel like my viewing last night definitely was like my main appreciation, because I love Holly Hunter. I kind of feel like she is like the anchor of this film, and then like you can't fault anything about Nicolas Cage. I mean, like one of his like iconic roles. The same year as Moonstruck, he did this performance, which is like unreal.
He's incredible in it.
But for me, it was like all about John Goodman last night. I was like rolling on the floor.
I love that, because I totally like when I watched it a few weeks ago or several weeks ago, I had the same feeling. Like that watch for me, it was like Holly Hunter and John Goodman, where I was just like, these two fucking guys. Like, they're just so good.
Well, what about
and William Forsythe too?
Forsythe's going to say.
What about Frances McDormand? Like
so
on screen
funny.
for like 2-3 minutes, and like absolutely
She's
steals
so
every
funny.
scene she's in.
And we've
Dot.
talked about it, but like the way that they,
Yeah, great names in this movie.
the way that they bring her in, and we're just like, we just watched Blood Simple, and it's like it's that first feeling that you have with Coen Brothers, where you're like working with an acting troupe. You know what I mean? Like with her and Emmett Walsh coming back.
Yeah.
Where you're like, I feel totally like happy to see my old friends in a weird way. Like, and she's playing a completely different role, and she's so fucking funny. Like, just
one of the prototypical Karens of the cinema. Like,
gotta do that high.
She seems like, she seems like she stepped out of like a world where her character has like a backstory, a history, like a whole lived life. Like you could do a movie just centered on her. That character is so like rich and well drawn. But yeah, John Goodman. Just able to kind of like undermine anyone he talks to until he's like actually like in the situation where he's like doing his robbery, and then he becomes like a fool and has his like confidence totally sapped from him. But every scene before that where he's just like this I don't know, just like so wonderfully manipulative to high, and like so sure of his own worldview and stuff like that. I mean, the image of him like combing his hair with like gobs of pomade covered in mud while it's just disgusting.
I know.
Like just
like,
beautiful.
That's the first image that pops in my head when their entrance not they're
So good.
They're in the jail, but they're like birthed from the jail when they're, you know, that scream he does is like.
There are multiple scenes in this movie where it's just John Goodman screaming for like 2 minutes is the dialogue, and it all three scenes like work perfectly and like just crack me up. I mean, the scene where they forget the baby.
Oh my God!
One of the best scenes ever. He's our little Gale Jr.
He was
now.
new, you know. He's new in this movie. Like he's not John Goodman yet. Like he'd been in the David Byrne True Stories movie, and you know, he was in like Revenge of the Nerds and stuff like that, but he's not like
his best
the
role.
guy as we know him.
Just kidding. But it seems like, this role, like the way he plays it at least, is just like a sort of like just a slight kind of like adjustment away from what's his name? John Connor? No, that's the Terminator kid.
No, that's Terminator.
You know what I'm talking about.
Roseanne.
Roseanne's husband,
Dan
which
Connor.
is Dan Connor. Thank you. Which is like, I mean, growing up watching that show Roseanne on TV, like he would give like, it was like, you know, it's all done in front of a live studio audience, like 80s sitcom style. He would give like incredible like Tony Award level performances on that Roseanne stage, like week by week, and he would get like not only be hilarious but also like go into a rage where he would feel like threatening and like punch walls and stuff. Like that guy's an incredible actor. Incredible physicality.
He's the reason I watched the show. I love that show for John Goodman. I didn't even know like really who
That's
the
why
other
you watch
actors were.
the Connors now, right?
Oh yeah, that's a thing. I have to check out the Punky Brewster remake. Now we're doing the nostalgia tour.
John Goodman is in that as well.
Oh,
no, but he
is he Punky Brewster? Is he Henry? He's Henry. Tell me he's Henry, please.
Punky.
It's called The Brewsters. Punky's been canceled. But in this movie, what I love about that is like Dan Connor feels like such a real character, and like, you know, Roseanne's inability to act and his like, you know, gravitas in that show kind of worked really well. But in this movie, like I said, even though he's kind of like in a very close proximity to that character, he plays it at the pitch of like a Looney Tunes character. Like when Holly Hunter kind of like, you know, cracks the whip on high a little bit, like John Goodman's face where he's kind of like, oh, that's how it is. Like it's brilliant, and it's like flawless.
So that scene is perfect because he does like, he knows what he's doing. He doesn't actually care that she like cracked the whip, the whip on him. He just knows how to manipulate high.
Yes, exactly.
In such a perfect way.
Or the scene where him and his brother are robbing the bank is just perfect. Toward the end of the film, it's just like, I don't know. I can't imagine anyone else pulling that particular scene.
But not to get off of this, because I want to get back to all of the actors in this, but that, I'm going to just say this right now, and maybe I'm insane, but like ever since I was a kid, I feel like it's the editing or something that like by the time they get to the bank robber scene, I'm basically like tuning out of the movie. Like it does lose steam for me. Like it picks it up again. It starts to lose steam, and then it picks it up with that amazing, you know, chase scene through the supermarket and the houses and all that stuff. And that's just like a piece in the middle of the movie that's fucking brilliant. But then like post that scene, I kind of have always just kind of like faded off until the end when they're like giving the baby back. And
Ian, I literally just called Child Protective Services because I fear you are insane for this take. No, I think two things. One, you're talking about your experience, which has been like watching the movie since you were 10 or something like that, which maybe like you go into like whatever mode you were in at that age where you couldn't hold your attention for certain things. So that's one thing that I'm going to say is your fault, not the movie's. And then two, the movie, but in your defense, the movie is like so wild and like out of control that it does kind of careen like from the earth a little bit, like kind of, there's parts where I feel like left behind a little bit in some of the chase scenes and stuff like that. I was wishing actually last night watching it on the couch that I could have seen it on the big screen, because like to be in a room of people and to have the image kind of like overwhelming you, I think that is the way to see it. And I think there are times when the movie does kind of lose you a little bit, like it's just like kind of going on its own way and kind of becomes unmoored maybe.
Well, they use voiceover a lot in this movie. They've used it in a lot of their movies, including, you know, their first one a little bit. And like I feel like they use it really well. Like High's narration kind of pulls you through the movie. And that was my thinking last night or a couple nights ago when I watched it, was just like, oh, they kind of like, whenever he doesn't do that for like 10 minutes, you kind of lose track of what's going on a little bit.
Yes, I think that's fair. Yeah.
So who else we got? I mean, let's talk for a minute about Holly Hunter. This movie was written for her. She's fucking, she was Frances McDormand's roommate, who at this point's married to Joel Coen. And, obviously she's in most of their movies. And like, she's just, I don't know, what other movie like has a female character like this? I don't even know. It's so good. Like, she's funny, and like, there's a line, and I've said it to both of you, like, that I think of all the time when she sees the baby for the first time and she bursts into tears and she just, I love him so much. And it's like the funniest, most real, but like cartoonishly real. I don't know. I just love her so much in this movie.
No, totally. And I think Kate Capshaw actually turned the role down, and she's really bummed out about that. I can't imagine her in this one, but I don't know.
Yeah.
She's what took me out of Temple of Doom, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
But, anyway, neither here nor there.
Holly Hunter's amazing. I also quote that line all the time, Ian. Like, anytime I like anything is making me happy, I quote that line. That's one of my favorite lines in all Coen Brothers films. And yeah, you're right. It is like what's amazing about her performance is like how real it is for how over the top she's performing it. Like, and real, like emotionally real, and like just like a super strong character, super funny character, definitely like the strong one of between her and High, and she's the one who makes a decision, right, to steal the baby too, so she's kind of driving the narrative as well. She gives an amazing performance, and I love Holly Hunter.
Yeah, she's so great in certain parts of that movie. Like her presence is so like strongly felt, especially when we're talking about John Goodman and how much he owns each scene. When she's basically putting her foot down, saying, "You guys will be out of here by the time we're done." They're like, "Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." Like she just whips the whole room into shape. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even though they may or may not have any intention, but she owns that. Love it.
One of the things that's like impressive as shit in this movie is the way that like you do understand why she falls in love with High. Like, he's got this, it's like there's on paper, there's no reason why she should. And like, it's not in the, you know what I mean? Like, just because she's a cop but like from that opening 11-minute, montage where it's showing their courtship, like you said, like, you get it. Like, you're on board.
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah. No,
it's really impressive.
Unlikely romances do happen. They are a subject of many movies, but this one in particular, like, is so believable because, like, Nicolas Cage is, in all his grubby kind of, like, weaselness, very charming in this movie. And, like, Ian, I don't know if you noticed, but he spits out a tooth in this movie, and he has like a little missing tooth. In like
I got my tooth back.
Is that your real tooth?
No way.
No, it's
somebody's
crown.
tooth. Okay, well, congrats on that. Well, it was funny because I just watched Moonstruck actually for Jenny's birthday. We had like a little movie night, and he's missing his tooth in that. And
really?
And I was like, have I ever noticed that he doesn't have a tooth in this movie? And then in Raising Arizona, of course, he gets his tooth knocked out by the biker, and then you see the missing tooth hole. That is not a special effect. I think he spit out his fake tooth and showed his real lack of tooth.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Huh. Well, he's great. He's really fucking funny. This is also early in his career, but he's also like, famously like hard for the Coen Brothers to work with, and they don't work with him again. But also, like, they even said, even though they butted heads a lot, he comes in with this like powerful driving force where he's just like has all these ideas, and they are very much like storyboarded out. Like, they know what they want, and that's not the kind of actor you want to work with. But even they said, they're like, I'd rather work with somebody with that much
with a fertile imagination,
than somebody where they have to kick their ass into gear every fucking time. So
absolutely,
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I guess they had a hard time working with Randall Tex Cobb, speaking of other guys. They're like, he's less of an actor than he is a force of nature, which is pretty much his character in the movie to begin with, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
I guess he didn't even know how to ride a motorcycle actually prior to this movie, which seems ironic because it seems like he was born on one. You know, like he probably rode a little tiny Harley out of his mom when he was, the day he was born or something. But nope, not true.
I love it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, I'll go. I love how, he comes into the movie just as this kind of like mythical creature, and then like at multiple points though, they kind of like undercut that by being like, my name is Leonard, and like, and then he makes fun of him at the end. He's like, big guy, rides a Harley, dresses like a rock star, just kind of like putting him in his place and like being like, wait, so is he real? Is he like just a guy? Like, very cool.
Like the pig squealing when he blows up. That's
like,
so funny.
He is like a fucking hellspawn, like demon guy. Like, but there is like these scenes where he is, like you said, where he's like doing business and just like existing outside of that too. But
can I talk? Well, go ahead. But I want to talk about that. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was just gonna say that like he, you watch him get born out of dreams, which is like another thing that's a trope in Coen Brothers movies, is like the dream sequences, like sort of dictating the movie in a lot of ways,
Yes. So I had this kind of revelation when I watched this movie after seeing No Country for Old Men, when I realized like how similar those stories are. You have like the good old boy, like kind of protagonist that you're like kind of with from the beginning. He commits a crime where he feels like, hey, like nobody's going to be the worse for wear after this. Like, it's sort of like a victimless thing. In both cases, you're totally on his side, even like though he's like a scoundrel. But this kind of like mild transgression unleashes this like embodiment of basically evil and destruction, and it like destroys all that is like important to the main character and like threatens to destroy him as well. And I think that's kind of the plot of like a bunch of Coen Brothers movies, and it's something they keep coming back to. Right. It's kind of the plot of Fargo with some variations. It's kind of the plot of Blood Simple with some variations, but it is completely the plot of this movie and No Country for Old Men. Even down to the point where like the motorcycle guy shooting at the lizard on the side of the road totally parallels the scene in No Country for Old Men where Javier Bardem shoots at like a giant hawk on a bridge. Like just weird little details like that. And I think also in both movies they're pointing at something which is like, Blood Simple begins with like the narration where he talks about like the way they do things in Russia and how, everybody in Russia is like pulling for everybody else, at least in theory. But then he only knows what goes on in Texas. And in Texas, everybody's out for themselves, In this movie, High's narration talks about how hard it is to stay out of prison when you have Ronald Reagan in the White House. And there's sort of this disconnect where he's like, but everybody says he's a good man. But he's not recognizing like the system behind it, and he's like, maybe his advisors are confused, kind of like, again, seeing it at a personal level, but not realizing that he's like a victim of a system that, Reagan kind of embodies. I bring that up because when Leonard Smalls is in the office talking to Nathan Arizona, who we haven't really discussed, but he's the guy who runs this unfinished furniture store, I guess, like chain, and he is like a classic Coen Brothers like blowhard CEO kind of like my way or the highway kind of like guy, but who has like, again, is like kind of like got a sweet side to him as well. He gives that line at the end where it's like where he talks about how much he loves his wife, who you've never seen him express any kindness or like softness towards, and who doesn't seem like a person who would possibly bring that out of anyone, in a moment that to me is very reminiscent of when Hudsucker's ghost tells the other guy that he's like, it was all about that one woman, and he talked, he's referring to like this shrill, horrible woman that you met earlier in the movie. Anyway, when he's in that room with Nathan Arizona, kind of explaining why he's going to get the baby back and demanding a fair price, which is going to be more than the $25,000, and he basically implies that he was like bought on the black market and that's how he was raised and stuff like that. Almost like saying that he's a product of the black market or just the market, and that's what he represents. He even says like it's simple economics, and I think they're getting at something which is like, we've created this monster from this kind of system that like does this to people. And Ian, you talked about like, why do they keep coming back to like poor people, But I think they want to I think they are looking at like systems of power and systems of oppression and like systems of economics and showing like what that does to people on the bottom and like their struggles. And like, again, they keep showing the same kind of people in power, the same kind of people, like his foreman, his like absolutely awful foreman, who's sort of reminiscent of like the guy who owns the bar in the last movie, just completely unlikable and just awful. And yeah, so I think he represents like kind of the market and the system and I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I think Leonard Smalls represents like basically, the economics of, the economic reality. Like for a poor couple, like living in a trailer, they're not going to be able to kind of have access to the medical science that like allowed Nathan, Arizona and his wife to like give birth to quintuplets.
I do think that that's like definitely like a good read of it. I think also like, just going back a little bit into what you were saying about how like one bad action, whether it's like incredibly harmful or not, can unleash sort of a series of events that you can't control is like another part of it. Because like, I mean, I think that that's like almost two different thoughts.
I think they're like sort of like parallel things that like they're like that sit on top of each other. There's like there's the world of like good and evil, and then there's the world that we create on top of it. That like we kind of bring these things into existence. To me, it's like the Futurama, where they create a robot Santa who can tell if people are good or bad. Actually, also played by John Goodman, actually. And then so then they bring that to life, and then it kills people that it deems evil. And it actually deems all of humanity evil. Right. So it's like,
I do agree with you. I wonder what you think. If we're talking about this as like a metaphor for that, like where are the Snotes brothers? Like,
well, remember when they steal the baby, they also say it's just business. Remember, so they're sort of driven to evil. And I also think, the thing about like the crime genre, or crime, it like they keep that's like their genre of movie. Like in all of their movies, it's like about criminals, like to one degree or another. And I think there's a line in the movie where he goes like, "Hi, you're a young man. You have your whole life ahead of you. Why would you want to get a job?" Like, to me, it's like if you're at that level of poverty, getting a job is not gonna like make your life any better. You know what I mean? And like we see Hai in the factory where he works, like drilling holes in sheet metal, and there's no joy. There, you know what I mean? There's no like meaning in that and stuff like that.
Yeah. When he says like. And I even find myself driving past
liquor stores,
that aren't on my way home.
Exactly.
You like feel that,
Absolutely. And it's just like, he's not going to make anything of his life or by doing that. He's not like, by going to like that job. And I think like in that moment, they're kind of pointing out like, for these kind of people, like what other option do they have but crime? You know what I mean? Like, not that it's like, that's like the good thing to do, or that there's anything like, respectable about it, but it's just like they just live at a level of like hopelessness and kind of like where that's just going to happen, I guess, or where it makes sense, where you could kind of like understand why it makes sense.
Yeah, you're raising a really interesting point that I hadn't actually thought of, Travis, in that there's a difference between like an absolute evil or absolute good, which exists in certain movies, alongside the people who are, quote, bad, that are bad because of the circumstances in which they found themselves. Like, the criminals are criminals because they're poor. People have to steal things because that's what they need to do, right? As opposed to, say, like an Anton Chigurh, right? Who just seems to be like an absolute, he's not driven by like money or any of this stuff particularly. He's just like literally like the demon of chance, like Two-Face. He just flips the coin. Do you live, do you die? That's it, Like, you don't have to do it. I don't have any say. It's the coin or whatever. He's like, coin got here the same way I did, Right. So there's a big difference between, I'd say, the entity, the absolute, versus like the societal structures in which have created the conditions for the characters to do the things that they do.
To both of your points, like they do a really good and intentional job of showing that like both Hai's crime, Hai and Ed's crimes, and even the Snotes brothers' crimes, like they aren't like, they're shown to be like, not evil. Like they're purposely shown to be like, these are just like unharmful, like absolutely like almost innocently
Yeah.
evil. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it's like, that's also
Totally.
on purpose. Like,
It's
clearly on purpose.
No, totally agree. I mean, who can argue like with a guy running full speed from the cops down the street with like a whole like armful of diapers? You know what I mean? Like that guy is doing what he's got to do to get his
With an
baby some
unloaded
diapers.
gun.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
never
Totally.
realized,
You know, like how do you
Yeah.
fault that guy? Like I don't care. Like let him do his thing. This dude needs his diapers. You know?
Yeah.
Can we talk really quick about that scene, the diaper stealing scene? Because, like, it's a piece inside the movie that, like, to me is, you know, its own standalone movie. They do this kind of thing every once in a while where they just, like, insert a sort of, like, you know, music video almost,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
That's, like, really... It's so fucking good, though. Like,
Yes.
that scene. And Carter Burwell, we talked about him last week on Blood Simple, but like he's the MVP of this movie to me. Like that score, like with that, you know, Pete Seeger holler and the like, just constant, like, I don't know, that high energy sort of banjo. And it's just like, it's so fucking good. Like it really, in that scene, how like it shifts, the score shifts from the grocery store, like Muzak version.
Yes,
back into,
yes,
like,
that's
the
a great
like, I
moment. Yes,
love
I
that
forgot
so
about that, yeah.
much. It's so good. I don't know.
Again, the sound editing coming through, but yeah, one of the best, like maybe my favorite score of any of their movies, and especially in that sequence that you're talking about, and the opening sequence, like just used so perfectly and so beautifully.
Yeah, you know, you mentioned it that
tour de
they
force.
wait 11 minutes for the
Pre-credit sequence, yeah.
stuff. Yeah, and like when it comes in with the vocals of that song, it's
Yes.
fun.
Yes.
Like it's
So
just fun. Where you're just like, oh,
I had
I'm on board.
serotonin drip oozing out of my pores. It was like you could touch me and get high, or like lick me and get high like a toad in the Amazon. Oh, I love it. But
Yeah, I didn't
But I
even-
almost wish, and again, like maybe it is my 10-year-old like self like that watches this movie still through those eyes. But like I wish that the whole movie had that. Like I wish that the whole movie was just High's narration with like, you know, the things like overact. Like I wish all of his dialogue almost was just his inner dialogue, you know? Because
I wish it was even shorter, the movie.
It's pretty short.
It's
but
extremely
yeah, I'd be
short,
okay
but
with
it's like, yeah, you should do a fan edit. And I don't like fully disagree with you. I mean, there are stronger parts than others, but it's just like the highs are, no pun intended, so high, and like, and then the parts that are low are just like if you dial into them, they're still good. It's just like it does kind of lose you at points because it's just like, you know, like it's like the Tasmanian devil that you're like chasing, and it's like you're just like it kind of like like I said, it kind of becomes unmoored and kind of like loses touch with the earth at points. And, yeah.
Well, one person that we haven't really talked about during this, I mean, there's a few people that we haven't really got to, but there's one
Madame
important
Teresa.
one, which is Nathan
Arizona.
Jr. Nathan Jr. and Nathan Arizona. But like the fact that this is like surrounding a baby and that there's like a lot of, you know, babies in this movie. And this is like a period of time, you know, like one of the reasons why like critics didn't connect with this movie at the time also was that it was like during this period of time where it was all a lot of fucking baby movies were taking over. Like
weird.
a lot of like hijinks with babies was like taking over culture. Like there was right in the same time as like Three Men and a Baby.
Same year.
What's it called? Look Who's Talking was like a year later, maybe right in there. But it was all like these movies where it's just like, look at how fun babies are. And the marketing for this movie was 90% babies. Like if you watch the original
Yeah, I think I have
trailer,
seen that trailer.
it's
That's fun. I totally
crazy.
forgot about that. Yeah,
It's just like showing the babies crawling around with Nathan or with High trying to catch them.
Right.
And like showing him on top of the roof of the car and like whatever. It's just like they're marketed as like a wacky baby movie,
stealing
which is
comedy, yeah.
really interesting. And it also like, I don't know, that's a weird thing. But yeah, Nathan Sr. was the other one that's like really good in this movie. That sounds so stupid sometimes. I hear myself talk, he's really good.
I'm glad you experience what Chris and I experience every time we record. Yeah.
Well, you know who-
actually. Maybe it'll inspire you to kind of pick up the pace.
Well, you know who wasn't good was one of the 15 babies they cast in the movie who got fired. One of the
really?
Well, I guess they cast 15 different babies for like the quintuplets in the movie, and one of which was basically playing Nathan Jr. And he got fired because he started walking. He like learned how to walk on set. And the mom like I just switches. I guess there's a story of like his mom switching his shoes around so he can't walk right or whatever, which is pretty messed up. He still fired this baby,
putting a metal band around the baby's skull so that it doesn't like.
Yeah, exactly.
Grow anymore, so its brain doesn't
imagine
develop.
Like having that on your IMDb page, like, I got fired from raising Arizona because I learned how to walk too fast.
That's hilarious. When the baby pulls the hood over its face during the car chase, one of the best, first of all, baby acting moments in cinema history, and second, one of the most adorable and funny moments of the movie. Just perfect. I'm so glad they captured that on film.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
I think like the other scene that I love with Nathan Jr. is when they bring him home to their trailer and they're walking him around, and it's like the way that like High is describing his house to the baby as the baby's watching it is like absolutely endearing in like a real beautiful way, but also you see this like immaturity that's like. You see that they're already out of their element. Like, I don't know. I just
that's true. And it's also like this movie's about like, a big part of this movie is like, can we be normal parents? Can we be good parents when like, but also like highlighting how absurd like the rest of society is too. There's like a little bit of like it's a very kitschy kind of view of like living in a trailer like in the desert, but also like when he goes into town to the grocery store, like all the women dressing in like monochromatically with like matching curlers in their hair and stuff like that. There's a little bit of like, we laugh at them because they're different, but they laugh at us because we're all the same, like that vibe. Right. Which is like, but it's like, but done well. It's like, it's very artfully done, I guess.
Well, there's like also, when they're watching the Arizona sunset, like on their, it's that like
lawn chairs.
It's that feeling of like where they're, they're trying to settle into this happy family life, and like that's a beautiful moment for them. Like absolutely, like I don't know, that all stuff works really well for me. What doesn't work as well, and we've talked about it, is like the shitty fucking cartoonish bad boss guy that comes in, and I know
it works great. That's one of the best scenes in the movie.
It's so bad.
King of Queens,
Frances McDormand's amazing in it.
I totally thought you were going to say, Ian, that because one of my issues that I hadn't mentioned when I said it was the cartoonishness sometimes of when the baby is reduced to like a cartoon kind of prop, where it's like, let's leave it on the hood.
That's basically what I meant too. It's just like anytime it gets like overly cartoonish, and like the epitome of that to me is, I don't know this fucking actor's name, and I refuse to learn it, of the guy who's, Travis's best friend, who's fucking
Sam McMurray. Doug's boss from King of Queens.
The worst show, and why I will never
continue. What's your point? What are you?
No, he comes on, and like everybody's so over the top in this movie. I mean, fucking between Nicolas Cage and Tex Cobb and like all these characters that are really just cartoonish, but then he comes on, and it's like there's something about his performance that's like cartoonish in a way that I'm like, oh, this is just like stupid. Like I don't like it. I don't like it.
he's playing an unlikable character, and maybe he's going like a little too far with it, but to me it works very well. I think he's like, again, he's the like boss of High, so he can kind of like come in and kind of like walk all over his life, and you know what I mean, and not feel any kind of like, not show any kind of grace or anything like that. I think because he's in that position, and I think that's maybe what they're trying to get across. I mean, that's how I kind of read it.
I feel like it's even the way he's shot. Like I feel like there should have been a fucking, gong sound when he gets fucking smashed in the face. Like it's just like, it's all just like too silly. I don't know. Cause he's like,
to me, if you start,
I guess if you're talking about like what the scene is for in the movie, besides like, because there's almost two scenes happening parallel to each other in that time, which is like Ed dealing with Dot, and that like little world, and then High dealing with his boss, and like the Ed and Dot thing I get, like the Holly Hunter Frances McDormand thing is just like a really well written thing of showing how like out of her element she is, but also like wanting to be a good mom and all this stuff. But like the High and his boss scene, like if it's there to drive the movie forward, it's just so that he basically is going to lose his job so that he like gets back into crime basically. But like, I don't even know if that's justifiable. Like, I don't get why they have that whole scene where he like suggests fucking his wife and like all this weird stuff that's just like out of place in the movie to me. I don't like it.
Huh. I like it.
Yeah. No, I also didn't really care for the part where, was he like throw something at his kid or what? Like, just to demonstrate that's how crappy of a human this guy is. Like,
it's great. If you start like eliminating stuff from this movie because it's too silly, I'm sorry to say you're going to have very little left when you're done. Like, I just don't understand how that scene is so beyond, like, you know, again, like High, like, yeah, stealing a car, like, I don't know, commandeering a vehicle and flying out of the windshield and like, I don't know.
Yeah, I
battling
get it. I mean,
a Mad Max Thunderdome inhabitant, and yeah. Fair enough. Okay. You guys and Ebert versus me. That's how it's gonna come down to it.
Well, I do love it. I mean, it's just, it doesn't feel, I guess, I mean, we're gonna go long maybe if we keep talking in the way that I want to talk, but like,
well, what else do we have to talk about?
Like,
go ahead.
Well, I do want to talk about like what, you know, tropes like this movie introduces into the canon of like Coen Brothers movies, and also which ones it continues.
Yes.
Because there's a bunch of them. But also, and you know, we've touched on a couple of them, like especially the, you know, in what you were talking about, like an action introducing like an unstoppable force of evil into the world, you know, like that's like the number one. And you know, it's the first pretty much like kidnapping out of several kidnapping movies that they have. Although Blood Simple is not kidnapping, but it's got, you know, a similar kind of crime. But it's also like that, like small time crime that's like fourth page headline crime that they talk about, you know.
There's also like the
carries through their movies.
There's kind of also like the incompetent criminal versus the like overly competent criminal potentially. You know, there's like one guy who's really and that's perfectly juxtaposed in Fargo, right? We got like Steve Buscemi, who's not like great, and then what's his name, Gale, or I can't remember his name for the life of me right now, but Gare, thank you, Peter Stormare,
who has no morality and no human feeling. Just goes straight for it. So and that appears a couple different times where like it's not just all criminals are dumb and bad, but you put the two against each other, you know. And also, like, the strong policewoman. If we're going to start talking about the tropes. The strong policewoman mother, who is kind of what Frances McDormand is.
Absolutely. They also, like, they have a dream sequence in Blood Simple. They have a couple of them in this one, including the sort of finale of the movie. But then, like, they use dream sequences a lot going forward, too. Like, it's a common thing for them. Another thing is like repeating lines of dialogue. Like they already have been doing that in Blood Simple, but there's a lot of that in this movie too. It's not really a trope as much as it's just their writing style, but like it works really good.
Yeah, but I also think it, and sorry if I already said this, but like it speaks to, I think, one of their themes, which is like how people are a product of their environment. Like their justification for what they do is like based on the language that they have available to them. Like, I mean, is only what they like pick up from the world. So we see that happening in the movies. And like, I think about how Holly Hunter keeps justifying stealing the kid because she's like, they said they have too many, which is like, or too much to handle, which is just like a thrown off comment that they make for the newspaper, which is clearly like tongue in cheek. But she's like, they have too much, so we should, you know, like, I don't know. I thought that was kind of funny. She's clearly like lying to herself, and I
also, that's a good point. Yeah.
Oh, you go.
No, just going to keep on, especially touching on what you just said, like people repeating dialogue, or even I think what it also does too, and it's related to what you just mentioned, but it like creates this very singular closed world that these films all seem to inhabit, because there's certain movies like Miller's Crossing is an example where people actually say the exact same line who have never spoken to each other before, that we've never seen to talk to each other before. So there's this like specific world with a specific way of talking. And again, that like also to your point, Travis, like the world reinforces, you know, the language that we use, but it's also to like emphasize that how closed and it's like bubble like this world that they inhabit truly is. It's unto itself within this film.
Yeah, totally. They also say a very important line, which is the...
Son, you got a panty on your head?
One of the criminals asks the guy at the gas station, do the balloons blow up into any funny shapes? And he says, no, unless round is funny. And of course, as we've seen and as we will go on to see, the Coen brothers absolutely think round is funny.
Round is very funny.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realize also, like, I don't know if this changed in the last 30 years or whatever, but... you know, it was distributed by Circle Films, which was their film distribution. Like, which I didn't realize that.
Where did that come from?
And like I said, I mean, obviously, like that came from them. They love circles and round things. But I mean, I didn't know if that was still the case or if that like changed distributions and got bought out by somebody. Because I didn't know that until I read it, is what I mean. But like, I don't know. I thought that was interesting. Like, they are so clearly all about like dissecting cyclical natures of things and like.
Drills holes into the sheet metal. Yeah. He also hears a story about a possible UFO from M. Emmett Walsh, and then later one of the news people asks Nathan Arizona if he thinks that, or that they heard that there's a rumor that aliens may have abducted the baby, which makes sort of sense coming like out of Arizona, I guess. But and then Nathan takes the question like way too seriously. But that's sort of.
I do love this line of dialogue. That's when he's asked what the baby's wearing, and he says, "I don't know, jammies with Yodas."
With Yodas on them.
Yes,
no Yodas.
I love
in the movie.
that.
No Yodas.
That whole scene is That whole scene is so incredible. I also love when he says the federal BI. That's what something that I really like this time.
The federal BI. Yeah.
I also want. There's also I want to say a Steadicam shot when. Hai is sort of like picturing what's going to happen when Mrs. Arizona like realizes one of the babies is missing, and this shot like zooms across her like front yard, hops over a tricycle, and like somehow flies over an automobile before going up the ladder and into the window and onto her face. Incredible shot
out of Evil
Blood
Dead.
Simple.
But also, Blood Simple, where the camera there's the one shot where the camera races up over the lawn, and then the other one over the bar.
Yep.
Exactly,
The bar,
Chris.
yeah.
Where it hops over the dude. So it's like, sort of a similar thing happening. But
Great call.
Yeah. Anything else? Well, can I say one thing?
I don't know.
There's a
Yeah,
weird.
please do.
So, Ian, I'm going to play the social justice warrior for a minute. Take your role in the podcast for a second. And I just want to say, there is something, it is like a not funny joke when one of the criminals like is like implied to be trans, but they have like a very limited understanding of what they are what they're going through, I guess. I don't know. It's like, there's something there that is funny, and there is like wisdom to it. Like, how do you express this thing when you're like on the lowest rung of like society, or like, you know what I mean? Like, how do people that are trans like end up like in these systems? But obviously the joke lands very badly, and it's like one of the first jokes of the movie. Ian, go ahead.
It's right at the beginning of the movie. It's like, in that opening whatever you call it, pre-credit sequence. And it's like, he just says, it's this giant black guy that's like clearly supposed to be like a man, like he looks like a man. And then he says, I get the menstrual cramps real bad.
But
it's like,
does he say it, or is he dubbed by an even lower voice? Because it sounds like it's dubbed. And there's a thing that, John Landis did in a couple of his movies. I'm thinking of Animal House and Trading Places, where he has like a giant black guy be dubbed by an even deeper voiced guy. And there's something a little bit unwoke about it, let's say.
The joke, because I mean,
let's say a little, not
you say you're taking the SJW role from me, and I get it. I do like try not to like watch a movie through 2021 goggles.
No, I'm saying you do
but
that.
Like, well, I do that, but I try not to judge it like
you can judge
harshly.
That's what,
that's
if we're gonna judge anything, like why not judge it all? Yeah.
I guess I just mean that, like, it's easy to say that was a fucked up joke and they shouldn't have made it. And if you were like a black trans person in prison in 1987, there's no fucking reason that they should be making jokes about you. Like, that's fucked up. You know what I mean? Like, the joke is on the guy. Like, it's not played for like, isn't it funny that this, or I should say on the girl, because if he's actually a trans person, then, you know, the joke is on her. But like, it's played for like, can you imagine how this person could think that they were a woman? You know, it's like, that's the joke.
Right.
Kind of, yeah.
It's also kind of unfortunate that, and this is another theme we talk about, I think, is that like he's the only speaking role of any black person in that film, to my recollection.
Well,
except for the other guy, except for his cellmate, yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, true.
His cellmate
The sand.
has my actual favorite line.
Yeah, the sand.
Nicolas Cage is line in response to him.
Yeah.
when we didn't have, you know, fowl, we ate sand. And
when we didn't have meat, we ate fowl. When we
didn't have fowl, we ate sand.
We ate crawdad.
Yeah, we had crawdads. We didn't have crawdads. We ate sand. And Nicolas Cage's face, as he's like completely zoned out thinking about Ed, and then all of a sudden he just snaps and he's like, "You ate sand." So funny.
And the delivery of the guy is really funny too when he's telling the story, because it's like very heartfelt, and then it's like, we ate sand.
Yeah. And you know, this one, like, not to, you know, you're allowed to give this a pass. I'm not, but I'm going to anyway. That like I'm talking to you, Chris, but like that, like, you know, it's kind of more understandable that in Arizona you're not going to come across maybe as many black people, except for in the jail system, unfortunately. Like, that's the tragedy of it. But it's also like, it's understandable. And I think there might even be some in his machine shop, like some, you know, black dudes. And like, so it's kind of understandable that there's not more black people.
Sure.
It doesn't make it like okay to not have representation.
No, I'm not ripping him too hard for this one. It's just
like,
other later ones we can actually give it.
It's later ones where it's really
Big
egregious.
Lebowski,
And, you know,
or,
like,
you know.
exactly.
Anyway.
And yeah, so anyway, I didn't mean to say it like that. I just meant to say like, I give this one a slightly bigger pass, even if it's not my right to give it a pass, but
Right.
just because it's like in this world, I can imagine that like Hi and Ed aren't hanging out with a bunch of black people. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I don't know.
So you don't feel comfortable judging that, but judging Sam McMurray's performance as the foreman, you have no problem with. That's like a man's life, like his
You know what?
career.
He should have been played by Bill Cobbs.
No. All right.
Oh man, what's interesting, we talk about, maybe it's wrapping up, but like thinking about it in context, you mentioned babies as a big theme around then. What's also interesting that year was cops and law, or a huge thing in that. Like that year, the top 10 movies were like Beverly Hills Cop 2, there's Untouchables came out, Stakeout, Lethal Weapon. I mean, Good Morning Vietnam is really a cop movie, but like the top 10 movies of that grossing that year were in, like basically like law people, you know, and like the way that the role the law plays. And, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily, you know, related, but it is an interesting, you know, tidbit.
Well, I think it speaks to the fact that like the Coen Brothers, even though they are these like auteurs who have this vision that kind of like spans time and like, you know, holds up, like they're still making movies with these same themes and even like, again, these parallel kind of like story structures today, but they're still a product of their time and their environment. And I think it's very interesting that this is a cop movie and also a baby movie.
And also like that also speaks to like that they were actively trying to sell out with this movie. Like they were actively like trying to be, you know, if they came on the scene with Blood Simple.
Yeah.
Well, I buy it because it is like, I mean, you know, it's so different from the other stuff that they're making. And it's, I don't know. I know we have to wrap up, but like,
we don't. We don't. It's our podcast.
Next week, we're talking about Miller's Crossing. And
looking forward to it, guys. Great talk.
It's going to be really fun. I can't wait for Chris to see Miller's Crossing for the first time.
Right? I know. One of the few I've actually not seen. This is going to be interesting. Let's do this.
All right, guys.
All right.
See you next week.
All right, guys. Till next week.
Bye.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to Auteur Detour. We'll see you again next week.